Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Johannes from Avatar. How's it going?
I'm doing good. Again, I keep saying when people ask that question comes with a lot of connotations nowadays. But my wife and my dog and I and my mom and my mother-in-law and my family members and my friends and relatives are all healthy, and it's a nice sunny day. So yeah, I'm doing good.
You guys have a new album out. The Eagle has landed.
The eagle has indeed landed, and it's called Hunter Gatherer.
So going back to the beginning of the process, how was it, the thought process, first of all, and then the creative process going into this record?
Well, this was probably the one where the direction was articulated the earliest, where we kind of knew just because what Avatar Country was, there was a lot of things that Avatar Country wasn't, because we wanted to do the comedy, because we paid tribute to a certain vein of metal. It's very, bright and shiny for an Avatar album. So we kind of knew right away that we were going to do that. The next one was going to be something heavier and more aggressive. So from a purely aesthetic standpoint, that direction was pretty much set early on. We wanted to achieve that this time. Then heading into the process, I think process is the big word. Like the mantra was trust the process. And we kind of made sure to carve out quite a bit of time working on this one. Meaning, first time we sit down at Jay's place, the producer for this was already in 2018. He reminded me of yesterday. I had completely forgotten that it was that we started that early, that we had some stuff to show and talk about. Then the film kind of got in between. So I think we really started to get into it in the beginning of 2019, but there was just a lot of space to let the song breathe, and that we had time to write a lot of stuff, forget about it, remembering it again, and start all over, and just savor every aspect of it. Because Avatar Country was written in in a much shorter period of time, which worked because there the vision and the idea what it was going to become was so specific, that it was so goal oriented. But here it was a bit more open ended. Like I said, it was just said like, oh, it's probably going to get heavier. But then the thing as we did a comedy, it's like when you growing up being in bands, you kind of learn to use music and writing songs as a form of therapy for yourself, just your way of processing life. And focusing so much on this comedic thing, albeit some serious stuff snuck its way in there, but it's under all these layers of royal fart jokes. That kind of meant that we didn't get to go see our therapist for 2 years. So that then meant that the darkness that came out with this album, with Hunter Gatherer, just became, I guess, much more compact simply for that reason. And yeah, just something we needed to get out of ourselves, I guess.
Do you feel like this record perhaps blends a little bit of what you guys had exposed the world to in the previous 7 records? Like you took some pieces of yourselves from those albums and then kind of put everything together in a melting pot that became Hunter Gatherer?
In a way, there can be a case made for that. The way I see it is that I don't feel like we went back to a previous era, but at some point the road divided, and we had this, more, I guess, we went down a path that became more and more about fun and games. And we didn't go back to whatever happened before that divide, but we went back, and now we took, the other way and moved forward with all those things that we had to, in order to do one thing well, you kind of had to exclude the other. If you want to do a good horror film, it's hard to do a good comedy at the same time, and so we came back to that point. But yeah, like, of course there are certain things that connect more with our past, with the music being more aggressive. But it's interesting to see now the difference, like I'm 34 years old, and the difference of doing aggressive music now as an adult, uh, compared to, you know, the stuff we put out in our late teens, early 20s, for instance. Like if you go to our album Schlacht, you know, which definitely has a lot of aggressive stuff going on, and if we would liken it to a horror movie and to a killer in a horror movie, Schlacht, the album, would have been the killer who, you know, breaks your window, you know, and attacks you and bashes your skull in with a hammer. You know, so it's violent and gruesome, but also kind of like inefficient,
Mm-hmm.
but yet very spectacular, a way of ending someone. Now there's a different sense of precision and articulation, I feel, and how it relates to the stuff on the album. So it's more, this killer of Hunter Gatherer would be more a Hannibal Lecter, someone who knows, and someone who knows how to use a scalpel really well. You know, knows where to stab or cut once for maximum damage. And at the same time, when just doing an album that's more earthbound and therefore deals with more specifics of maybe what's going on now,
Mm-hmm.
talking about those kind of things at this age or this period in our lives comes with a bigger sense of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So how to deal with how pointing my fingers at people while also then acknowledging that fingers should be pointed at us and at me and all that. So yeah, so there's a difference. Yeah, that sense of sharpness and precision in what we're doing, I think, makes it different from any of our more aggressive work in the past.
The reason I asked you that question is because I felt that the previous 7 records perhaps capture a glimpse of where you guys were in that period in time. So it's almost like a snapshot of yourselves and as the band at that moment in time. And this album, I know this is such a cliche, but it feels a lot more mature. This album feels more like it captures the history of the band. So it's more like an all-inclusive body of work, not necessarily just a snapshot of a specific moment.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting. I always like what people take from listening, and I can't say that is. I subscribe to the idea of death of the author once something is out. So I'm sure there might be some truth to that. While at the same time, the experience of making this album was very much at the time of making it something that gave a very strong sense of being in the here and now with it, of being, of
living the moment.
Of something that really document this specific period. Like I can tie a lot of lyrical ideas, especially for Silence and Age of Apes and Colossus, to a specific book that some of us read in the last couple of years, Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. A lot of ideas fed directly from there, and I'm sure if I now start to sit and remember it song by song, other specific things came up, and those songs that deal with more personal matters couldn't possibly have been about those things prior to this now, because I hadn't lived through them yet, you know. And I guess that might be one of the things that also gives the sense of maturity. Like I'm trying to be as honest and as frank and, you know, personal as I see fit with the lyrics, and as such, a personal perspective from a 34-year-old is of course, well, 15 years more mature than from the 19-year-old, I guess, you know. So that is a place that comes. And at the same time, with all their darkness and aggressiveness, it does deal with angst. And that's usually a word we reserve for younger bands and how they do things. But to pretend that we aren't all angst-ridden little pink bags of skin, and thin skin for that matter, once we get older, it's just, you know, very dishonest. But it's an interesting thing, cathartic thing to get into in your writing at this stage in life. So yeah, like I can see the maturity, and of course, I think again there's a sense maybe of throwback to we used to do, simply because of that. Well, Feathers to Flesh was a very, very dark album thematically, but that darkness was still filtered through gotta work, gotta work, and all that. And then of course Avatar, and with the music videos we did for the album, once the music was done, really, I guess, brightened it up. And Avatar Country, that was the whole point. So then it really, I guess, you can see more of the past clearly, because again, the journey through darkness continues. Although now I feel we went deeper than ever into that darkness.
Coming from Avatar Country into this album, I didn't feel like this album was a concept album, but I definitely felt like
Correct.
This album had a theme. There was a theme
exactly.
that permeated through it. Do you agree with that? To me, the theme was humanity. I don't know if you agree with me or not.
No, 100% that. It was very important for us to not do another concept album. It was because with Feathers and Flesh, we started out doing it because we had no idea what it meant to do a concept album. To have a story that would tie all the songs together, to make the book, and to come up with characters who would sing the different songs. That was all new, which made it hard. Which is the idea of diamonds are created under pressure. That philosophy. We want to always feel, in one way or another, something that should make us feel a bit like beginners. Some aspect of how we approach each album should be, in one way or another, something we haven't done quite like that before. With Head Apocalypse, it was to record it live. With Feathers and Flesh, it was to do a concept album. Avatar Country was to make a comedy. And as Avatar Country also was a concept album, there was kind of a happy accident that it happened. It was just, we hadn't planned Avatar Country, but once it was time, that is where inspiration took us. And we just have to follow that. Again, you have to try to be sincere and honest in what you do. And that became what it needed to be. But that also meant it was 2 concept albums in a row. The third time, it would have become a hindrance. It would have become a formula. And we didn't want that. So it would have turned into, instead of a challenge, a safety net. So Be Gone, you go from Sgt. Pepper to the White Album and try to figure out what it means to make an album like that again. But yeah, that being said, doing the concept albums became a great exercise in seeing the big picture while working on the album. To imagine, to have a kind of a sense of an end result, also when you work with individual songs and individual parts of songs. So it was all pulling in a certain direction. And yes, humanity, the whole idea that hunter-gatherers, that is kind of the profession, the lifestyle that evolution set us up to have. And then we have become very far detached from it, for better or worse, and usually worse. So we are, it's weird then to live in this cyberpunk dystopian science fiction times we're living in, while still being the same ape we were back then. And so then what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human right here, right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really interesting journey that you take us on this record. At least that puts us in touch with our own humanity and makes us think about our own place within the race itself. And that takes me to my next point. This record has 10 diverse tracks, very diverse tracks. Did you guys have a fear that the diversity of the sound and the approach of the tracks would hurt the fluidity of the album as you move from the first track all the way down to the last track?
If you listen to Queen's A Night at the Opera, you got Bohemian Rhapsody, but you also got 39, Good Company, I'm in Love with My Car, Death on Two Legs. I think that it's a strength in albums rather than a weakness. And I think, again, that many times people depend now too much on, a formulaic way of thinking that belongs in pop music. It doesn't belong in metal to me. Unless the artist really, really wants to, then that is absolutely fine as well. There's a place for everything. I ultimately trust that we will have a sound that can be called the sound of Avatar, because I sing, John plays drums, Jonas and Tim play guitar, and Henrik plays bass. And that's the sound of Avatar. So for that reason, no, I don't worry about it. It's by design, in the sense that we always say never write the same song twice, you know. And why would we ever want to do that, you know? And plus, we are multiple songwriters in the band. Plus, we are very good at then claiming ownership of each other's songs. That is kind of where the magic happens. Like, there's not a single genius in this band, believe me, but the genius and the magic happens between the five of us. The essence is in the space between us rather than in any one member. And but for that reason, you know, things that there are so many different ingredients put into that Avatar sausage, and that diverse and rich palette of flavor is kind of the point.
You talked about Avatar sound. What what you defined Avatar sound. I think to me that sound is perfectly defined in Silence in the Age of Apes. That opening riff is definitely Avatar sound. I mean, the moment you're listening to it, you know you're listening to an Avatar track. You know you're not listening to anything else. This is Avatar. It was important to have the album starting off with a track like that has that signature sound as it gets going.
It was important to have a song that to start with something fast and aggressive. It was important, like it made very much sense to us to have something that screams go, go, go right away. Especially, again, it's always a pendulum. We did one thing, now we want to do that other thing. And with Avatar Country, orchestral national anthem, and then into a song with a very long intro, and we get to hear even some solo playing before the first verse. You know, like that was the way of thinking there. Really build and build and build and build towards boom. And Feathers and Flesh started really mellow. It started with the sadness, you know, and then built into the heavy metal roller coaster, you know. So we've done, you know, different approaches every time, and this time, therefore, we want to just kick the door in, and before people know they were even on a, you know, in a car, we would already have been hitting the highway, you know, like that's kidnapping. That's throwing someone in the back of the van, and you don't even realize you're in there before you arrive to whatever cabin they want to tie you up in the basement. I don't know what I'm talking about, but
Makes
something
total
like
sense
that.
to me, though. It makes total sense. The album starts off like that, like, you know, immediately you don't feel yourself getting into the car. You just feel yourself with no seatbelt going down a hill, and there's no brakes. That's kind of the feeling that you get as
exactly. So to have that go, go, go way, you know, and we just like to do things differently every time. And the opening track is such an important thing. Like, it can be very open. We might not even know which songs will actually end up on the album from the selection we have. And this time the selection was huge. That was one of those challenges I was talking about for this album, was to, at least on a demo stage, have more finished songs than ever before to choose from. And with that in mind, still, we quite early on, Silence popped up as the opening track, and that also helped a sense of direction. We're gonna make an album that starts with da 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 da, you know, like, and take it from there.
Two other tracks I need to ask you about, but I definitely want to make sure I ask you about Gun. I love the sequence that you have, Justice and then Gun, because I felt literally those two songs were somehow interconnected. There's a little bit of one that moves into the other. But Gun is such an incredible track, such a unique track. Where does this song stand for you on this record and in general?
Well, musically, it stood for probably the biggest challenge of the album. To track the vocals were just, you know, you just haven't done it quite like that before. And one thing is to sing ballad and try to be pretty, you know. But if a song that deals with that much vulnerability and sadness, then it can't just be pretty. You know, there's some ugly in that as well. And to find that right balance where it's musically where it should be, while expressing what it should express, and that took a lot of takes to nail, because I've done so little of that leading up to this. And it also took 7 years to finish writing it. The initial ideas are from way back when, and it just was hard to finish writing because it's interesting. Just because it was such a different song, it was treated differently than the others, and there was always a sense of it needs to turn into something. That meant you put that distorted chord bow in the middle, and suddenly it was a power ballad, and it was fucking, you know, want to lay you down on a bed of roses, and oh, no, I do not, throw it away. So it took a while for us to start treating that song like we treat any other song. The same principle that goes for the heavy stuff. You know, you figure out the best riff and the groove, and thus let that song be what it is. Don't force anything upon it. Just build with what you have there and stay in that emotion. You know, that is usually the answer to anything we're doing. And it's been true for a song like Hail the Apocalypse. It's been true for Silence and Age of Apes. It's also true for, you know, When All But Forces Failed. That had twice as many parts, but we took out all the pretty melodic things because they felt like they were apologizing for the heavy stuff. Just kept the madness, and it became that, again, razor sharp thing. And once we started to treat Gun like that, it came together real nicely. But yeah, it represents a lot of things, and I guess just the idea of you give a boy a gun, like there is a sense of giving up, but it's also like the pain, like this weird thing where trust can be weaponized. This strange thing where no one can hurt you like the ones closest to you. That's strange space of just, again, vulnerability, as important as it is to dare feel that and deal that. And at the same time, that is where someone, if you're vulnerable, you're open for to be injured.
I've never heard that expression before. Trust can be weaponized. I'm definitely going to use it if you don't mind. I think it's
go right ahead.
I think it's such a great expression that really matches the world that we're currently living in, where trust in people is being weaponized.
But at the same time, you know, like I believe more in trusting people than not trusting people, and I think people grow from it. Like it's what makes it sad and complicated, you know, because the answer is not to stop trusting people. The answer is way more complex than that.
Yeah, it's never nothing is ever black and white. There's always a little
exactly.
And speaking of gray, perhaps A Secret Door, one of my favorite tracks on this album.
Well,
and I love the whistling, by the way. It kind of gives it a Western vibe, like a Clint Eastwood kind of movie.
Yeah, Ennio Morricone is a favorite since my teenage years as a composer. So there's a bit of that in there. And then there is, I don't know, I also like Wind of Change. And I like a Swedish guy named Björn Olsson who uses whistling a lot on his in his stuff. I like whistling.
Yeah, it worked out really well. How did you guys get Corey Taylor to do the whistling?
Oh, that was easy. We just asked him. What it really was, he entered the. He came like he knows Jay very well, and he entered the studio. He came to hang and hear some stuff. Corey and his wife came by, and he was very open to do something as he was there. You know, if we were up for it. And first thing that came to mind is how brilliant it is in the early seasons of South Park when George Clooney gets to be a dog, rough, you know, and that is his line. And Jay Leno is a cat. So it was just kind of funny. Like, we are of that generation where we were teenagers when Slipknot hit the scene, and they ended up being an influence. You know, we covered them back in high school, did all that. I have paid to see them, and Corey is one of those voices of our generation in terms of growing up a metalhead. So what do you do when that icon enters the studio? Yeah, tell him you can whistle, motherfucker. And you know, of course, he's a sport and was a sport about it, and is a very, very nice person. And it became even funnier because what happens is, I will whistle, you stand in front of the microphone, then it's serious business. You know, he's a musician, there's a part to nail, then it became very serious for a while there, and that was brilliant.
I have one more question for you, and that is about your vocals on this record. Was this album challenging from a vocal perspective?
Yes, by design. I think at the very core of what metal is, first and foremost, metal is riff plus groove, finding the right groove, finding the right beat to that riff. Iron Man is the best riff, has the best riff in the world because it has the perfect drums for it. It's Iommi and Bill Ward. That is one of the big essential pieces that defines any kind of metal you do. The other pillar upon which all of this stands is intensity. And that can take different shape and forms. It can be purely from an emotional storytelling point of view, but like that, it exists in many genres. With metal, there's a literal physical intensity. One of the reasons why it was such a good idea to record the album live, why it's such a brilliant thing still to shred guitar will always have a place in metal, because it says when you play fast, or really hit the strings or hit the drums. Fuck sound replacement and over triggering things, like you want to hit those drums. And same thing goes for vocals. So yeah, if I've started to be comfortable, I write some high notes on one album, tour it, get more comfortable with those high notes. Okay, then a bit higher next time. There's a place for that. One, of course, to be able to do whatever melodies I want to do, and have us get the technique out of the way, get my body out of the way of the musical vision. But you want a certain sense of push there, a certain driplets of sweat coming off from your forehead running down your nose. That's in this. The sound is created through physicality. That's such an important part. You need to sweat during a metal concert, and you need to also sweat in the studio. So I'm looking for those kind of challenges constantly. Then on the other end of the scale is just doing better melodies, having as rich as possible melodic language, and when the singing parts are melodic, and to just grow there as a composer. And with more, if the vocals melodies gets more intricate, there's a aspect of nailing them well as well. But that's part of the growth of it. And I get, like I touched on before, it's very important to me and to us as a band that we, to the furthest extent possible, keep feeling like beginners.
On that note, well, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
It was my pleasure. And I have to say this before we go. I saw you guys in 2018 on the Avatar Country Tour in North America when you guys played in Toronto. And you still, up to today, my favorite live band. That show was outstanding. Outstanding.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, yeah. I must say, I saw your reaction stuff on us, and thanks.
Thank you for watching, and definitely thank you for taking the time to chat with me about the record. I love this album. Best of luck with the release, and hopefully we'll get to see you guys on the road soon.
I hope so too. Thank you very much, man. You have a good day.